A very, very warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay, and welcome to Yalos, sitting on the beach on the island of Sifnos. And if that video didn't whet your appetite for some Mediterranean living, then I'm not sure what will. As you can see, I'm straight off the beach with absolutely no apology. A day in the Greek sunshine, preempting an hour of work. Well, it's actually 2 hours of work, because some of you might be joining me for the hour after this for tonight's Paul Kluver Pick n Pay Winemakers Table, where we'll be running through some of Elgin's finest wines and pairing them with some recipes that you'll be armed with by the end of the hour spectacularly. So 2 hours of hard work for me, the first hour of which is one I've been looking forward to for some time. Now, I'm going to be joined very shortly by a gentleman by the name of Pieter Lemmer. Now, Peter's got a really, really tough job. He spent half his life running around islands in Greece and the other half in South Africa tasting wine. Such is the life of a negociant. He claims to have some other side business, but I don't really believe him. He's going to be explaining exactly what a negociant is. There are many who might not know, explaining how his particular business works and giving me a taste of some of the wine that he takes to the rest of the world under his label, but also trying some wine from the wine list here at Yalos and seeing some more of the Greek wine, which I've been exploring over the last couple of weeks and will for a couple of weeks to come. Before we do that, there are two things. The first of which is Happy Pinot Noir Day. It is International Pinot Noir Day, and I have to apologize to Bernice and the team at Himmel and Arda Wines. We were looking to do a celebration of Pinot Noir today, but then I got stuck on a Greek beach with Greek wine. So first show back in South Africa, Monday the 5th of September, we'll have a selection of producers from the Himmel and Arda and be raising a belated glass to International Pinot Noir Day. The other thing to do, as we always do when we kick off the show, is have a look at this week's wine news. But it is out. This has become a bit of a cult wine, hasn't it? The Post Sea Salter, a wine that celebrates that salinity and crisp summer mineral-driven delight of Sauvignon Blanc from the Darling Hills area. And as is so often the case, just a name has struck a chord. And I think the wine has struck a chord as well. It's a really nice style of Sauvignon Blanc, one that's not massively different to the kind of style that defines some of the great Santorini Assyrtiko I've been drinking a lot of and will continue to over my Greek trip. But the reason for posting this is that the new vintage has been released. So if you are a fan of the Sea Salter Sauvignon Blanc, if you're looking to get stocked up in good time for the advent of spring and then summer, then the guys at Post have their new vintage of the Sea Salter up and running. Give it a try if you haven't already. Now, this is happening out at Nederburg. The man on the left is a chef by the name of Martinez Ferreira. You might remember him from DW 1113 in Johannesburg. He's won multiple awards, featured on multiple top restaurant lists. He is now based down at the Jordan Wine Estate, where he is serving up some terrific wine. But he's not going to be at Jordan instead. He's going to be at Nederburg on the 26th and 27th of August, end of this month. A man who's worked under Gordon Ramsay and Heston Blumenthal. And what he's doing as part of this Discover series at Nederburg, Pete Goffwood was there recently, is putting out a dish that's going to have a number of plant-based recipes. And some of those might take you by surprise. So end of the month, if you're at a loose end, 26th and 27th, the Manor House in Paarl, that is Nederburg, and their Taste, Learn, Discover series. And also the end of the month, or technically the beginning of next, the 1st of September is Cup Classique Day. What are you going to have to celebrate it? Well, Krona is never a bad bet. And their new vintage Rosé Cuvée Brut from 2020 has arrived. And as with so many of our rosés, it's all about the elegance and the fruit as opposed to sugar and sweetness. And it is a wine that will be a great option for you as you load up with Cup Classique and some bubbles to celebrate Cup Classique Day, which naturally we will be doing on the show as well. So that's new from Krona. We will also be featuring Tim Atkin on the show, a very special show coming up on the 6th of September. What you're seeing now in partnership with the guys at Strauss, this is Tim Atkin's 10th South African Special Report, and your chance to taste Tim's wines of the year. That is at Strauss. Tickets are 750 Rand each, the very best of the Tim Adkin Report. 4 hours. There are a limited number of tickets, and Tim's report is a hotly anticipated review of the South African wine vintage. I'll be there filming for an hour or so with Tim, so you're welcome to come along and say hello, but far more importantly, to drink the wines. Tim has given 95 points or more in his 2022 South African Special Report. And that is your news, so let's move into some wine. Then here's a quick look at where I find myself. We've got a little video of the restaurant Yalos on the seafront here in Sifnos. This is where I was a little earlier on today, and you can see just that unfolding. That is just a beautiful view there of a lovely little restaurant on the seafront, and it is one that is frequented by the South African High Commissioner to Sifnos. That's our live camera at the moment. Here he is, South Africa's High Commissioner to Sifnos, Pieter Lemmer. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and welcome to Sifnos on behalf of the people of the island.
It's an island I'm visiting for the first time. It's an island I've heard a great deal about, and there are a few things I heard about Sifnos from people who've been here. I think my friend Neil Campbell is watching. He loves the place. He's very, very envious. They spoke about the beaches being fabulous, which is not unique to Greek islands. They spoke about it being quite rugged, full of churches, full of natural beauty. But they also spoke about the food and wine scene more than most other islands I'd heard. And in the 3 days that I've now been here, what I've discovered about Sifnos is that the food is very distinctive. It's not your normal just plates of souvlaki and moussaka. There's a very distinctive Sifnos menu, it would seem. And then pretty much every restaurant I've been to, the house wine has been more than pleasant, but they've also thrown out a wine list in most cases, and a wine list that's clearly had a bit of thought to it.
Yeah, so I've been coming to Sifnos for about 12 years now, and what struck me first was just the amazing food, right? So you can go to any restaurant on this island and have a fantastic meal. It's a lot of things mostly grown on the island, chickpeas, a lot of things like vegetables, tomato, fresh ingredients. Strangely, it's famous for lamb, less so than fish. So obviously, as a South African, I felt at home quite quickly. The island has always attracted a lot of Greek tourists, so people looking to avoid tourists, to be honest. But even since the early days, you could find a lot of, not a lot, but pockets of French and Italian tourists that were here for the food. Over time, there's a few nicer restaurants that popped up now. The wine lists have improved drastically, which I love, right? So I've had to smuggle less and less wines to Sifnos, and I can actually now gladly support places like Yalos and their Greek wines.
And we're going to be tasting some of their wines. We're going to be tasting some of your wine in just a moment. I think it is on its way. Before we do that, though, before we talk about your current wine story, tell me about finding Sifnos, because of all the islands across Greece, this is the one you've settled on. I'm sure it's more than just they make lamb, so I'm going to go there.
Well,
how did you end up here?
That would have been a good reason in itself. So I many years ago met a lovely Greek lady. She grew up in Athens. We started dating, and she's been coming to Sifnos with her family since the 90s. I got married on the island, and so far I'm busy with the living happily ever after part. So long may that continue.
Oh, I'm glad you found your way here, because it's given me somebody to drink wine with this evening and to share a wine story with. And I'm fascinated by your wine story, because it's not where you started out, as I understand. Tell me about the journey from South Africa to London, and then the journey from something ghastly involving spreadsheets to having fun with wine.
Yeah. Well, I've realized over time you do need the spreadsheets to pay for the wine, so let's not dish Excel on your show. I grew up in South Africa in KZN, went to study in Stellenbosch in the early 2000s. In 2008, I moved to Holland, so I spent a couple of years in Holland working in oil and gas, which is very, very much related to food and wine. I found my way to London I'm now doing consulting work in the food and hospitality industry. So at least it's now somewhat related. We were a group of friends in Stellenbosch that started a little property business in South Africa in 2006, and 5 or 6 years later, we thought, managing flats is quite boring, right? You can only get excited so many times to paint a kitchen, right? So we wanted to do something we love, we're passionate about. We started talking about starting a wine business, and we had a friend, a very good friend of ours, a winemaker, Stephanie Witt from Thistle and Wheat, that helped us along the process. So finally, in 2017, we decided to push the button. Started looking at, it's quite a difficult question. What wine do you want to make if you don't have a winery, right? None of us inherited any wine, so we had to decide, what are we making, right? We decided we wanted to make a Chardonnay with a nod to a fantastic wine made by Chris Allight, Cartologie. We wanted to buy Chardonnay from about 6 or 7 plots across the Western Cape to make this great Western Cape Chardonnay blend. But very quickly into the winemaking process, probably within 6 weeks after the harvest, we realized there's a specific parcel of grapes we bought in the Hemel and Arde Ridge that deserved to be bottled on its own. It just that so much character and personality. You just couldn't blend it into something that I still think is a good idea, but that specific parcel deserved better than that. So our first vintage, 2019.
Under what name?
So our wine business is called Grape Wines. It's
very Greek.
Very Greek. I thought it's a good idea to pick an Afrikaans name until I realized I'm going to have to explain to everyone in England what a draaiboek is. But it's the Afrikaans word for a script, right? A story. Because we say every wine has the wine itself, right? If you look at any bottle, it should have a story, right? Just that's what makes wine so fantastic, right? So it could be a story of history, geology, of a season, like weather. It's so many different stories. And then when you open a bottle of wine, right, and we're going to open some wine later, that's a story in itself, right? We're going to taste wine in this lovely setting with Barry White in the background. So many stories. So we called ourselves Draaiboek Wine. Our first wine is a Chardonnay, 100% Chardonnay called Onskuld, which is the Afrikaans word for innocent, which is kind of a wink to our the naivety in which we approach this the project. So we've learned a lot of hard lessons, and in some cases expensive lessons, but it's been a lot of fun.
I've got no doubt it's been lots of fun. Has it, for somebody who does crunch the occasional number in another life, has it become a business, or is it a rather expensive hobby?
It's
probably somewhere in between.
It's somewhere. So it's definitely a business now, right? Yeah. You can't. I don't think you can do wine half-heartedly unless you want to do a barrel here and there, right? As volumes grow. A wine business requires quite a lot of attention and passion and love to sell wines, right? Wines do not sell themselves. Especially, we're lucky in South Africa. We've got tons of very, very good wines, right? And it's good for a consumer, but as a wine producer, you have to stand out. So it takes quite a lot of time and effort. Any business you can take back into a spreadsheet if you want to. It's a little bit boring. I try and avoid it so we can focus on the wines.
Tell me a bit about where these wines are going. Let me just make sure we've got our frame right there. Who's buying these wines? Where are you selling them? What sort of response has there been?
Yeah, so our wines have been sold in South Africa. We've got a very good partner there, the Hermanus Wine Village. Who's been with us from the start. Our first vintage, we only had about 200 cases, so very, very low volume. They were a great supporter of ours. We export to the UK, and our wines are available through Vino SA. Ben out in Cornwall is doing a great job. We have sold in Holland and Belgium in the past. The real tricky thing was we launched our wine in 2020. which obviously was a bit of a drastic year to launch any wines, because we couldn't even move our wines within the country, never mind get people to taste it. But the people that did taste it received it quite well. So we've been building our export volumes to the UK quite nicely. And then, as I say, in South Africa, we sell direct and through the wine village.
Right. Well, I'm looking forward to tasting this wine. We've been promised it will be delivered shortly. I'm sure it's arriving any moment. As we do await its arrival and wait furiously at our waiter, the wine that you're making is just a Chardonnay. Is this the beginning of a greater empire? And if so, what's next? Is there already something new that's been planned?
Yeah, so Chardonnay, we fell in love with cool climate wines just by doing our first Chardonnay. So we've been experimenting with a few other cool climate plots of Chardonnay from Elgin and other parts in the Inland Arda. We've been experimenting with Pinot Noir, which is as we've learned, the heartbreak grape. But it's one of those grapes you become obsessed with it. But for this year, we're releasing just an unskilled Chardonnay. We've got a very modern style, almost easy drinking Pinot Noir that we're selling to our wine club members directly, which is on sale now. And then next year we're going to release a second Chardonnay, but that's all I'm saying at this point.
It's all very cloak and dagger at the moment. All right, so clearly something that you are having fun with. And it's clearly an industry that you've really got stuck into. You've got a lot of friends in the wine industry. And one of those friends is a guy called Yannis, and another is a guy called Ian. And in fact, that's how we got introduced by the great Ian Noir, and by extension, Yannis from Basaltis Vineyards. And that gives you a direct link to this Greek wine community, which, as we've been discovering over the last few weeks from different winemakers, is very much on the up. It is as exciting a time, I think, as there's ever been for Greek wine.
Yeah, it's been a discovery for myself as well, as much as I think the Greek wine industry has picked up its game as well. Greek wines, it's always it goes well with the climate, it goes well with the lots of acidity in their food. So their wines, the acidity and the mouthfeel is quite something. I do feel probably for the first 5 or 6 years, I've never found a wine that I would call elegant. They're all very fruit forward, very wines you need to have with food, I think. Over the last 5 or 6 years, I think, like with many wine regions in the world, the newer wave of winemakers are coming in. They're making wines that are more elegant, more approachable. You don't have to drink it with a dish full of salt. People are starting to understand their varieties a little bit better, picking more scientifically, I think, than traditionally. They're planting grapes on interesting places. Obviously, Mykonos, Santorini is very famous for its Assyrtiko. There's an island next to Mykonos called Tinos, where they've now started planting Assyrtiko, and these are some of the most elegant white wines I've tasted.
Was this the wine you told me about the other day? You said it was as good an Assyrtiko as you'd ever had.
Yeah, apart from Yannis's Assyrtikos, obviously.
Just in case Yannis is watching.
Yeah.
Oh dear. All right, well, we're going to be trying some of those. What I think I'm going to have to do, let's have a quick look through the camera and get a look at the beach, which is looking wonderful. And while you do have a look at that, our waiter is clearly absconded, so I'll ask Peter to go and rescue some wine for us so we can taste it. What you're looking at there, other than a gentleman who is an accidental guest star on the show today, that's a view over the beach here. And that's one I spent some time on both yesterday and a little bit this afternoon. And it's one of the elements of Sifnos that is particularly appealing. Lots of sandy beaches, not the pebbles, and just really interesting food, and not, as I said earlier, the usual souvlaki and moussaka and regular Greek dishes. Instead, it's stuff made with chickpeas is a huge dish here in Sifnos. Lots of lamb, as Peter mentioned, and just a really interesting interesting selection. So there we go. You're also getting a masterclass in how to clean tables at Greek restaurants, happening front right at the moment from one of the staff here at Yalos down on the beach here in Sifnos. All right, well, we can jump back into where we are. Pieter is about to arrive with some long overdue wine to sample today. Thank you very much. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, Pieter. And here comes our wine. What we thought we'd do today, and Pieter will be back with me in just a second, is we're going to have a look at both Pieter's Chardonnay, but also Greek Chardonnay, and then also try out a couple of other Greek grapes, and just further the education that this 4 weeks is certainly giving me, and I hope all of you as well, as part of this Greek adventure. To give you a throw forward, next week we are going to be spending time on the show on the island of Milos, which is only about 40 minutes or so by ferry from here, with some more winemakers, not from Milos, where they don't make wine, but from the rest of Greece. And we'll also be taking in some wine from the rest of the country the following week when I get to Athens, and that will include a show with the aforementioned Yanis from Vasaltis, who has been on the show before, as well as a couple of South Africans. We're going to have a look at South Africa and see if they go to look out for Gary Jordan, amongst others, on those shows from Athens. Right now, though, we are just waiting for our wine to arrive, and my apologies for the delay. Sometimes things in Greece just happen a little more slowly and with a little less direction than planned. So probably something lost in translation with our team here at Yalos, but we finally have some wine. So there we go. And we are kicking off. So now this is the wine. Here we go. This is the wine we have been speaking about. This is the Onskul, the Innocence, as part of the dry book. I'm always really interested in labeling. If you can see there, the grey and white little flick of gold, the book being read by a kid we can't see. Give me the story behind the label, Pieter.
Yeah, so what we obviously worked with someone far more creative than I could ever be, but we wanted this label to tell the story of the wine, right? So if you've had enough glasses and you look at the label, you should be able to start telling us a little bit of the wine, right? So there's obviously the South African tortilla in there. We are a very South African bunch. We're very proud of being South African, and we want everyone to know this wine is South African. Got a little bit of a small part of the Eiffel Tower.
I saw that. Where does that come from?
Well,
other than France.
Well, the real Eiffel Tower stands in a residence in Stellenbosch called Dagbrand.
Of course,
that's where we all met. So we had to give a nod to that. But this is the 2020 Chardonnay.
Pour away.
This was released in October last year, and we're gearing up to release.
So please note the South African tasting sample.
I thought we were drinking it. And I have to point out there is no spit bucket on this island.
Yes, they're illegal in Greece, as they are on down really nice wine. Well, cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, very happy to get you to taste it. 2020 wine, I think this is just starting to hit its stride. It's sort of opening up really nicely at this point. If you taste this wine blindly, and you've had enough wine in your life, I'm sure, you would say this is a Jemmel and Aarde wine, right? It could only be made in Jemmel and Aarde. We're very, very proud that it's a Jemmel and Aarde wine, and one of the nicest things to do each year is we buy all the wines from everyone, all the Chardonnays, and we do a comparative tasting. And it's so nice to see our own wine in this lineup, where you can tell it's got a sense of place. So.
The story of Chardonnay at the moment is one in which the days of the swathes of butter and the am I drinking wine or tasting wood, I think largely behind us and for the better. But the kind of the scaled down version of that certainly hasn't left us. And there's the case, depending on where you're from, where you're getting your grapes from, that style of Chardonnay when you decided what you wanted to make, was it a case of, well, this is the only Chardonnay that this terroir, that these grapes will give us? Or did you try and shape it a little into something that you felt fitted your philosophy?
So Chardonnay is an interesting grape, right? Because it grows in most climates, it grows in most parts of the world, but you can also, with the same grapes, make very different styles of wine. We want to make a style of wine that can age, but you can still taste the fruit, because we love the fruit. We love the grapes we use in this wine. So we still want you to be able to taste the fruit, right? We don't want you to taste oak, but the oak for me gives it a bit of balance and helps with the ageability of the wine. As you make a wine, so the first year, 2019, we made a wine which we liked, but we wanted to tweak the style a little bit more, to give it a little bit more structure. And I think that when you make a wine, right, there's no right answer.
Yeah.
There's never an end, right? It's just continually thinking, what do you like in the wine? What do you want to change? How do we evolve it? How can we be better? And there's some levers you can play around with in the cellar. And the tricky thing for a business person is these levers take 12 to 18 months to play out, right? So it's quite frightening sometimes. You make a decision and you already need to make the decision the next vintage, and you're still waiting for the answer of your previous vintage. So it's quite nerve-wracking sometimes, but such a great experience.
Dare I say, based on the name of your wine, your fruit is very much written a script, and it's your oak that's just binding that script together, giving it that backbone and the cover.
Yeah.
It's not, it's there, but it's certainly not shouting at you, and it really is allowing what is some beautiful Hemelonada fruit to come to the fore.
Yeah. So our first vintage, 2019, we use about 30% new oak in all our bottlings. We did change the toast levels of the oak a little bit. 2019, we only use lightly toasted oak just to give it a bit of structure. But we felt this wine needed a little bit more of that toasty flavors to just balance it out. 2019 was a bit of a wild ride. 1 month it would have tasted spectacular. The next month you got hints of Riesling, and it took about 18 months for it to settle down. Nerve-wracking 18 months, and now it's opened up pretty nicely.
All right, well, we're not going to drink this on its own. We're going to drink this in comparison. You just shift in a little bit there so we make sure we get those broad shoulders into the screen. There we go. You're basically only here to tap into the army of Pieter Lemmer fans we have around the world. And what we're doing, and I love doing this sort of thing because it sounds like it's all very academic, whereas what we're really doing is just justifying drinking more wine. But what I've got here, now this looks like it's a label out of sort of early 1970s Stellenbosch, done as a primary school project. But it's not actually, because this is some Greek Chardonnay. And again, we've said this a couple of times over the course of the show I've been here. I think most people know about Assyrtiko, and they've maybe heard a bit about a Zino Mavro or a couple of other grapes, and they kind of think, well, the Greeks have Greek grapes. And then they suddenly discover, well, no, hang on, there's some Cabernet Sauvignon, there's some Merlot, and in this case here is some Chardonnay. It's not simply the authentically, historically Greek grapes, but there's also a very strong element to Greek wine that is the grapes we know more usually from France and other parts of the world.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So I'm not going to try and pronounce any of the regions or the wineries. Just I'll be thrown out of Greece quite swiftly. But this is it's a massive wine region that produces, I would say, probably 70% of Greek wines. When people think about Greece, they think it's a warm, dry, hostile country, right? So this Chardonnay, and I picked the Chardonnay just to show, you can grow it in it anywhere, you can make different styles. So I thought it was interesting to see the differences. So it's grown on slopes in the mountains where there's snow late into spring. So cool climate.
Snow in Greece.
Believe it or not. So it's I guess you can debate is a cool or a moderate climate, but it's somewhere in between. It's just this perception. Not everything is Santorini, hostile, warm, and dry. They're obviously this is fairly dry still, but cool climate Chardonnay. Made in a slightly more modern style. I think historically with Greece, the problem was you would get Greek wine or Chardonnay, where people try to make Burgundy Chardonnay in Greece, right? And I think we've learned in South Africa as well.
Make Chardonnay on our own terms. Very much so.
Have confidence to do your own thing.
Yeah.
So this is how this one got into the lineup today. So I've never had it, so I'm very, very interested.
Quite a fruity nose.
Yeah, so very little oak on this thing. I don't think
there's any on there.
Which I think is very typical of Greek wine, white wines in particular.
Yeah. We tasted a Chardonnay on the show Thursday last week in Messini, and that was also from the area, from Messini. No oak whatsoever, just done in steel and purely telling the story of the fruit.
Yeah, so this. You almost can't taste it. It's a Chardonnay, right? In a blind tasting, I wouldn't have picked it up.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm wondering if I'm just getting it's becoming programmed into me because I am in Greece. But there are so many of the white wines, depending on their age, there are notes of Riesling and similar that come through, and this not so much in the nose, but on the palate. A little bit of glycerol in the finish. And
and I think Greek wines in general, the mouthfeel is very wines coming from the mainland. They all got a very similar mouthfeel. I won't describe it in words because it might come across more negatively than what I mean. But this could only be a Greek wine.
All right, well, let's have another look at it before we move on to our other Greek wines from. And Delisi, it is from Lesbos, and there we go. So these are actually from the slopes of Mount Olympus. So we're basically drinking wine for the gods, which if you'd seen Peter and myself with our shirts off on the beach earlier today would be entirely appropriate. All right. You also pick up on that, and I see straight away from it, at 13.5% alcohol. It's reasonably high, particularly for a white wine, and you can definitely pick that up both nose and mouth. And what it really does is it gives for a cool sense of discovery with both. And this is obviously just something you're drinking for work because you make Chardonnay, so you need to explore other Chardonnay as well.
No, I'm booking out these hours. Any wine tasting is a work event, as I've learned from Ian Nubia.
Exactly. All right. Well, look, we're not just doing Chardonnay because this is very much about discovering Greek wine. And you've got a couple of others. I'm really interested to see what you have brought out. And you threatened to find me some wine from Crete. Have you done that?
Yes. So this is a wine that's more modern in style. So I wanted to just at least showcase something that's more modern, easier drinking wine, but with a little bit more complexity. This is a Greek grape, which is I'm going to try and pronounce. Maybe you should give it a go. You seem like your Greek accent is good.
Trapsatiri. Almost sounds like it's got cheese in it. Got that at the end.
I don't know what the rules are in terms of winemaking on Crete, but it's from Crete. It's more modern style white wine. It's one of these, I think, hundreds of Greek grapes, right? It's one of the most complex wine growing areas if you come into it from the outside, right? It's a bit like starting to watch cricket in your 30s. You're never going to fully understand all these grape varieties, but there's literally hundreds of them.
Yeah.
And people are getting to grips with how to make it. So
I have spent time on Crete. I can't say I've had any wine there. I did have some absolutely ghastly spirit that my wife's uncle's cousin made. It almost killed everybody at the wedding. And they all thought this was perfectly normal. But I haven't had a chance to try. And straight away, it's not the first grape. It's like Muscifilero, like a couple of others I've had, where immediately that kind of Muscat d'Alexandre nose leaps out of the glass at you. And you're just thinking, oh, that's a dessert wine. And then you go into it, as so many of them are, and I think this one will be again as well. It's a lot drier than those.
No, it's a fairly it's very fruity on the nose, very dry wine, different in style than the Greek whites they would have made 10 years ago, right? This is a wine it's made to be drunk right where we're sitting with your feet full of sand. In between your lunchtime food and wine and your dinner time food and wine, right? This is sort of now's the perfect time to drink this wine.
All right, which we are doing very happily indeed. What's prompted that shift? What's got people moving away from what they were drinking and into this style of wine?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give my opinion, but I'm not giving it as the Greek wine expert. It's just I think wine in Greece was very driven by tavernas, right? So big box wines, it's nice and cheap and cheerful. You buy it by the kilogram, which I still chuckle at. It's a kilogram of wine. And I would just think it's part of the modern wine movement, right? Consumers are looking for something they can drink any time of day. You don't need to make a meal for it. You don't need to age it for decades. So some of these wines I wouldn't age for decades, but
which is absolutely fine, especially in this kind of space where there is going to be a lot of wine that is an antidote to the summer heat as much as it is anything else.
So to me, this is a nice wine. This is 2021. Should probably be drunk in the next
25 minutes.
Yeah, well, I was going to say 45, but you can go 25. It's acceptable.
All right. Yeah, it's again, as you move on to our last one, not a style we see a huge amount of in South Africa. Maybe that will change. How much of an influence will Greece have? I'm going to ask you that as a final question, but before we do that, you do have one more wine. What have you got for us for our fourth wine, our third Greek wine?
Yeah, so this is a grape Malagousia.
Malagousia.
So I think anyone that's ever been to Greece would have had it's one of those wines, the grapes that you get on any wine list. So this is
and often I find either on its own or in tandem with an Asiatico in a blend.
Yeah, that is, sometimes they blend in Sauvignon Blanc, so all sorts of funky blends. So Malagousia, take a screenshot and try and read that label. Anyone in South Africa would be interested.
When you can read it, you've had enough to drink. Go home.
Yeah.
So if people are drinking, watching us drink this Malagousia, they've never had it, what's their reference point from a South African grape?
So I would go to the Alsace, right? The Hoogstraminer or something like that, right? So there's a lot of things like I always pick up a bit of lychee in there. Very fruity wine, and they can be excessively fruity. This one is very well made, very restrained. Again, I don't think made to be aged for decades. It's drinking very well now. This is a single plot made with a lot of love and care.
And made where, do we know?
Good question. This one I am not sure.
In a single vineyard.
Yeah, in Greece. It's made in Greece. It's my best guess. We were going to have a Certico, and I think they switched us out last minute because I know with Certico making its a grand entrance in South Africa this week, I thought it was going to be interesting to put in a Certico that's not made by Janus into the lineup.
Okay. All of these come together, and not just three Greek, but your South African wine as well, to tell a bit of the Greek wine story, because your wine is starting to appear in flickers on one or two wine lists, one or two stores.
Yep.
And so the wine scene in Greece is, as I said at the start, so exciting. Lots of great Greek wine, lots of different grapes, but also international wines. You can pair and decide, but I think lots of people, certainly people like myself, we want to drink wine in the place we've gone to if it's available. Yep. I also want to go home with some lessons, and I think I've taken some already, but I'd be fascinated to get your thoughts on what the South African wine industry can learn, both from where Greek wine is now in terms of how they've sold themselves, how they've developed themselves, and what those Greek grapes could possibly say to a South African wine future.
Not a difficult question at all. So I would think, this embracing your diversity, right? And I think in South Africa we're quite good at doing it. But in Greece, you literally have hundreds of grapes that people use to make wine. And I think historically they would make all these grapes in a similar style. And that's a very broad statement. And I'm sure Yannis is going to call me later tonight with some a bit of education. But it's just everything's unique, right? Every grape, if you literally make wine from hundreds of grapes, make a wine with that grape. Don't try and make a wine with grapes grown in Burgundy, right? Because your grapes are not grown in Burgundy. Your grape is not a Chardonnay. So don't be shy to be yourself, I would say.
I think that's pretty good advice. I tried earlier. You refused to tell me. Beyond there is another Chardonnay coming, much more about the specifics. But broadly, I get the sense the on-school, the wines to come. This is the long run. This is something you're definitely seeing a bright and enthusiastic future for, and it's a story that you're only just getting started with.
Yeah. When you look at a wine business and making a wine, because all your decisions that you make take, as I said, 18 months to 2 years to try and answer a question, but you only get the answer 2 years down the line. So it's very easy to talk in terms of decades, right? And we're in it for the long run. We've got some exciting plans, and hopefully in October, people will pick up a bottle of Onskuld, and we love speaking to people that drink our wines. It's one of the most rewarding things we've done is meeting people like Ian and Gia in the industry, but meeting people that buy and enjoy our wine, and that's really rewarding.
And I think that will be a growing number. Last one, I know you have got it already planned. You are heading back to South Africa, as you do regularly, but with a specific mission in mind. The sense I get is that Cape Wine has got a lot of people excited, not just in South Africa, and you are one of those with a pilgrimage on the horizon.
Yeah, wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. Very excited. I know an esteemed Greek winemaker joining us as well, and I'm very excited to do a bit of a wine trip afterwards, exploring some unknown areas in South Africa.
Fantastic. It's going to be a great few days. That is Cape Wine in the first week of October. Sustainability is the key theme, closely followed by sharing lots of wonderful wine with wonderful people, which is exactly what I've done over the bulk of this hour or so. This is Yalos. Last one for you quickly, because I know that the guy who runs this is a good mate of yours. People coming to Sifnos. This seems like a spot that with a combination of great wine list, beautiful beach, and a pretty good menu is one to stick on the top of the tourism list if you get to the island.
Yeah, very soft bed. So basically you come for breakfast, you have a coffee, and you leave around 11 p.m. Hopefully with a designated driver, or there are good buses on the island as well.
Indeed, there are. It's just another lovely island in Greece. And what's really stood out for me on my time in Sifnos, which sadly comes to an end on Sunday, is the fact that the cuisine is so distinctive. It stands out from anything else I've had in my travels in Greece, and in a very, very good way. And the wine lists are fantastic. They've been put together with a lot of care and a lot of attention, and the occasional bottle of South African wine, which can only be a good thing. Peter, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Best of luck with the journey with the new wine label. I know it's young, but it already looks really exciting. And if not before, we shall see you as the official South African ambassador to Sifnos over in Cape Town for Cape Wine.
Yeah, if only we can get the South African government to pay for a little house here, then we'll all be good.
Oh dear, I'm sure we get a tender sorted out one way or another. All right, that does it for this evening, partly because the sun is setting, but mostly because Peter and I have some very important wine research to do on the beach over my right shoulder. Thank you so much for watching Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay. We play out with some final scenes from our other camera, looking out over the beach at the moment and onto water that is a degree or two below bath water, and even calmer and quieter. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you back again Monday live when we come to you from Milos with a selection of Greek winemakers, more Greek wine, and more celebration of a wine industry that is as exciting as any in the world today. From Yalos in Greece, together with wine negociant Pieter Lemmer. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you again next week. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.